Hello and welcome to the Dark Reading News Desk, coming to you from Black Hat USA 2025. Next up, we are joined by David Brauchler III, Technical Director, AIML, Security Practice Lead at NCC Group. He is here to chat about NCC Group's new research, When Guardrails Aren't Enough, Reinventing Agentic AI Security with Architectural Controls. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, Alex. I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing great, and I'm very excited to talk to you because I feel like every week at Dark Reading, I am writing a new story about a prompt injection attack, or even more recently, non-prompt injection AI attacks. So I want to hear what's going on and what are you working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've observed throughout our customer base, now I'm a penetration tester, I do AI hacking all of the time, is that so many organizations are still stuck at what we would call step one, where they're saying, hey, my AI is responsible for my company's reputation and brand image. It might say bad things about me. I want to stop that. And so they have the guardrail solution. And throughout my experience testing these systems, I've observed that you can get these systems to execute arbitrary code depending on how it's configured. You can exfiltrate passwords. We've been able to dump entire databases. And ultimately, as the world moves more agentic, the attack surface of these systems is growing exponentially. So we came to tell people, finally, that guardrails are not a first-order security control, but every customer we've tested has had bits and crumbs of security controls that are effective at stopping attacks beyond prompt injection. And these are the types of ideas and lessons that we need to be starting with. The first order security controls, the hard security boundaries, beyond just, can I stop an LLM from saying bad things?
What kind of controls are you thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's an entire lecture in and of itself. But for starters, right, the most critical point of the entire discussion during my talk was that if an LLM or any AI system has access to high privilege and sensitive functionality, it should never be exposed to untrusted data. And similarly, if you have a system that you're exposing to untrusted and potentially malicious data, you should never give it access to high privileged functionality. Now, there are a number of different ways you can do that, one of which being dynamic capability shifting, which is a technique which tracks the level of trust in the data that's entering the context window of a language model and dropping the privileges of that model to match the least trusted input. Because one of the things we need to remember, language models are always going to be agents of the inputs that they receive. And so it's not your LLM, the user, it's the LLM of the threat actor, of your application, or even the administrator who's getting data into your system to begin with.
I can't help but think about a lot of the conversation that's happening around AI with security, where you see the opportunity for these LLMs to take some of the load off of analysts and whatnot. But at the same time, a lot of organizations have applied AI fairly hastily, as we know it right now. So as you're thinking about these issues and you're looking into these vulnerabilities, these weaknesses, does it kind of feel like you're trying to stop a train already in motion?
It's almost like trying to stop a tidal wave, really, because all of these organizations are getting top-down directives from the C-suite or the shareholder saying, hey, we need to be doing this AI thing. And the developers are like, sure, let's throw an LLM in there and see what happens, not realizing that AI completely augments the attack surface of an application. We're so used to object-based permission models where I initialize an object, be it a user, a system, and like your users aren't going to go to bed one day as system administrator and then wake up the next as a threat actor, unless I come with $1 million briefcase, right? Mm-hmm. But your LLM, because its functionality is dependent on the data that it's exposed to, might just do that. So it's changing our security models from object-based permissions to data-based permissions. And so developers just don't know what they don't know when it comes to the lessons and the new security practices that they need to follow when integrating AI into either brand new applications or existing ones. Even security companies are still at the phase of, oh, I red teamed your AI, meaning I got it to say bad things, and never taking the next step of, here are the assets in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability that I was able to compromise by using your AI agent in your application.
So it sounds like your research concerns, rather than putting up guardrails after you've already maybe exposed some data that you shouldn't have, making good decisions up front to limit the potential blast radius.
Yeah, it's about drawing appropriate security boundaries around the assets that you care about. And now instead of just focusing on, I have an agent or a user who is crossing a trust boundary, now I have to dive a level deeper and look at how much trust I apply to the data itself as it moves throughout my application environments. So it really is a mix of old and new principles because our security fundamentals haven't changed. But in the same ways that we've seen throughout other paradigm shifts, be it cloud, IoT, or blockchain, the way that we apply those fundamentals to our existing systems is completely revolutionized.
In the same way that you were telling me earlier that, using guardrails to beat prompt injections is just something you're never going to really permanently outrun, so you need to start thinking about things differently. I almost see parallels between that line of thinking and how a lot of folks are thinking about phishing right now, where yes, MFA is good. Yes, there are good options to limit the blast radius of phishing attacks as we know it, or slow them down. But really, a lot of folks are trying to have the conversation now about, sidestepping it entirely, making good decisions up front, and then phishing-resistant authentication like physical keys so that you're taking more of the onus off of the employees because user training, it works to some extent, but not entirely. Do you see some parallels between that line of thinking and sort of what you're working on here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I call LLMs the intern in the middle scenario. And so you should be managing them as you would a low permission intern within your organization. And I apologize to all the great interns out there. I'm sure you're wonderful. But ultimately, right, if somebody has the ability to be manipulated by threat actors, we add additional security boundaries around them to make sure that either that untrusted data never takes over that user, or we have the appropriate controls to limit the blast radius once that attack takes effect. I really compare it to web application firewalls. Okay. It's when we talk about guardrails, we're talking about heuristics that lower the likelihood of an attack being successful, but they are not first-order security controls. If your developers wouldn't use a WAF to be the only source of protection for their applications, you should never rely on guardrails being the only source of protection for your LLMs.
Something I want to think about as we're sort of starting to wrap up is if I'm someone at home watching this and I'm thinking about integrating, an LLM, or maybe I have one integrated but want to make good decisions now that, I'm thinking about it in a certain way. What's your advice? What's your takeaway? If someone looks at your research, what's the one thing or two things you really hope they take away from it?
Yeah, the biggest one is, as I mentioned earlier, not exposing trusted LLMs to untrusted data. But beyond even that, we need to be integrating our LLM analysis into even our threat modeling practice. So look for data sources, which is any system whose input can enter the context window of a large language model, and data sinks, being any system that is consuming the output of a large language model. And if a threat actor can get untrusted data into one of those sources, and it can reach a sink that they don't already have access to, you have a potentially critical attack chain. So we need to work on severing those attack chains by making sure that either your LLM is operating in a high trust context with no access to untrusted data, or in a low trust context that can access whatever data you want. And there are a number of different strategies that I wish we had time to get into for actually managing those different types of access control layers and passaging messages back and forth. But I would suggest just going to NCC Group's research website and looking at some of the data that we've published, because these are strategies that we can implement today, and organizations are doing this successfully. It's not a lost cause. It's just a matter of knowing what you don't know.
Excellent. Well, this has been great. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you so much, Alex.
And thanks to the folks at home for joining us at the Dark Reading News Desk at Black Hat USA 2025. My name is Alex Culafi. See you next time.